Welcome to Keeping It Real with KC. I am your host, KC Phoenix, and it is the weekend yet again. And as I always say, these weekends keep going by super duper duper fast, but I'm glad you made it. I'm glad I made it. Okay, let's get the housekeeping stuff out the way. KIRWKC.com for the main podcasting website. Also in the details section of this podcast or video if you're watching on YouTube or whatever. I have now added a link to the Apple podcast because this podcast is carried on several platforms. And I've looked at the analytics and I know people listen to the show on Apple, but I didn't know that most podcast listening happens on the Apple platform. And as much as I love my main podcasting platform, which is Anchor, which is through KIRWKC.com, I didn't know that so many people listen to their podcast on Apple. So now I'm including the link to the Apple podcast as well. So just so people will have it, even though KIRWKC.com will take you directly to the main podcasting website. Regardless of whether you listen to it at the main podcasting website at Anchor or Apple or Google Play or Spotify or wherever this podcast is carried at on 8 or 9 platforms, I'm totally cool with it. It's just since I recently found out most podcasts are listened to through Apple, now I'm including the Keeping It Real with KC show Apple podcast link so people will have it for those who prefer to listen on Apple. If you are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to click the subscribe button followed by the notification bell. That way you will know when I upload a new video. Same thing for Daily Motion. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. You can follow on Twitter, KIRWKC. You can follow on Instagram, KIRWKC. And there was something else I wanted to say, and it was on the tip of my tongue. I was going to tell you guys something else, and it just left. I took notes for what I was planning on talking about today, but outside of that, I didn't have any notes for other stuff that I was planning on telling you. But whatever. I'm sure it'll come back to me later. Oh, now I know. The episodes that I'm doing this weekend, I'm only doing 2 video episodes for the weekend. The third episode will be a podcast only episode, meaning it is exclusive to the podcast. You will know that it is a podcast only episode followed by the episode number. It will say PCO right after the episode number, and you'll know that it's a podcast only episode. So I'm doing 2 video episodes that I plan to upload, and then I'll do a podcast only episode on top of that. So it'll be a total of 3 episodes today, 2 being video, 1 being podcast only. If you go to the podcasting website, you can listen to all of the episodes, including the podcast only episodes. I'm doing that because I'm still doing administrative stuff behind the scenes. You will have more information about what else I have been doing behind the scenes more than likely by next weekend. Again, I don't like to tell people stuff until I do it. So now I have that out the way. I'm doing this show, this episode, the title, of course, being You Can't Control People. Believe it or not, I have several episodes already mapped out. I probably have, let's see here, like maybe 10, and I'm just glancing here, maybe 10 to 13 episodes already mapped out as to what I want to talk about. And I did not plan on doing this episode today. I actually didn't plan on doing this episode at all. However, as our lives change, so do our needs. And I had an incident And it made me think, so I decided to do this episode. In the midst of doing this episode, that you can't control people, you also have to know that I didn't get a full idea of how I was looking to break this down until last night. And the weird thing is, Janet Jackson, of all people, popped into my head because of the song Control. And you know how you listen to a song that sounds really, really good? Like, I'll use Britney Spears, for example. The song Toxic. Amazing song. Older song, but amazing song. Because that song still bumps to this day. I promise you, if you ask half the people what the lyrics are to Toxic, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you. Because the beat is so infectious, you just feel it. And you know the chorus a little bit and maybe a few other words, but you don't really care about all of that. That has sort of been my thing with Janet Jackson on certain songs, and I didn't realize it until last night because I was like, wait a second, I don't know word for word the lyrics to Control. And I like Janet Jackson. She's an amazing performer. Amazing, amazing, amazing performer. But I was like, if somebody put me on the spot and was like, I'll give you $1 million for you to tell me right now what are the lyrics to Control, I could probably start it off, but I wouldn't be able to finish it. So then I sat down last night and listened to Control again, reading the lyrics. And there was something in Control that I heard that was repeated over and over again. And it was the bridge of the song. I'm not going to read you all the lyrics of Control. We don't have time for that. The bridge is what stuck out the most to me for this particular song. And it says, and I'm going to read from here, got my own mind. I want to make my own decisions. When it has to do with my life, I want to be the one in control. And that bridge, as I was hearing her sing it, and I was thinking about that bridge, I was like, wow. And you would think that it's common knowledge that you can't control people. Now, in the larger scheme of life, you can never control anything. The only thing you can control is yourself. After saying the only thing that you can truly control is yourself, why the hell would someone want to give up the one thing that they can truly control? You can't control people. People don't always do what you want them to do or what you expect them to do. In addition to that, you can't expect people to handle a situation the same way you would if you had that exact same situation. You're two different people. As I mentioned before in my episode, you only have one soulmate. I mean, you have more than one soulmate. If you meet someone that you want to possibly have a relationship with, they may have some of the same characteristics as the other person, and they may remind you a lot of the other person you were with, but they are not that person. The reason they're not is because every individual is different, like a snowflake. like fingerprints. Every individual is different. Because every individual is different, every individual has their own mind. They have their own mind. They have their own thoughts. And when it comes to expectations, you shouldn't have any in regards to control. Again, you can't control how someone acts, or you can't expect someone to act the way you would. For example, I always use the opening door thing, or holding the door example. You may hold the door open for somebody because that's just what you do. You're being polite. You're holding the door. You may run into somebody who's seen you before, who you both work in the same office building, you've seen each other dozens of times, and they're in front of you, but they don't hold the door for you. And you act shocked. But you can't control that person. And you can't expect them to act the way you previously acted when you held the door open for them. Now, the biggest thing that comes into this is that you don't have access to someone's mind. You don't know what's going on in here. You don't know what is influencing someone's actions. Where you want them to do something a certain way, or you expect them to do something a certain way. You don't know what has happened before or during the situation that has influenced them to do the opposite of what you wanted. You don't know that. And just because they don't do what you want them to do or what you expect them to do, it doesn't mean the thing that influences their actions is a negative thing. It could be a positive thing. Because regardless of whether something is positive or negative, it still takes up energy. Positive and negative both take up energy in people. It can take up emotional energy, it can take up physical energy, it can take up mental energy. There's a lot of things that take up energy. When energy is thin, an individual may not have the bandwidth at that time to act the way you expect them to act, or to do what you want them to do. They may not have the energy. That what's going on may have nothing to do with you, or it may have something to do with you, or may just have a little bit to do with you. It could be related to something totally different. The thing is, you don't know. Regardless of how much experience you have with an individual, whether you've known an individual for 1 year, 6 months, 6 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. Everything is on a case-by-case basis. It doesn't matter if out of 30 cases, 29 of those cases have been the same. Yes, you can assume that the 30th case would be the same as the other 29, but that doesn't mean that will be the case because you don't have access to an individual's mind. So you don't know. And because you never have access to anyone's mind, you can't control what they do. And you can't expect them to do something the way you would. Why? Because every individual is different. You can't control people. And I know that statement is an obvious statement. Even as obvious as that statement is, people still can't process it to this day. If people could process that they can't control anyone and that they should not expect anyone to do what they would do because it's two totally different people, the world would go a lot smoother. There would be a lot less conflict because whether it's in a friendship type of relationship, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's in a coworker relationship, whether it's in just an everyday interaction with people, you have to understand that you can't control what people do. You can't. And that's what really amazes me, where someone is shocked that an individual does the total opposite or doesn't do what someone wants. Now, obviously, you can get down in the weeds and discuss things on a morality level and on a social level and on economic level and all of that other stuff. I mean, you can split hairs, dice it up, and do what you want to do with it. You can have a total separate set of conversations as related to this. However, it still comes back to the same thing. You can't control people. You just can't. And the sooner that people realize they can't control people, the less stressed they will be. All they can do is control themselves. And I'm not saying always ride the wave, because sometimes you do need to be proactive. But you have to respect that everyone is an individual. You have to respect that. Whether you agree with their way of handling things or not, you have to respect that everyone is an individual. And because everyone is an individual, you can't control them. You have no control over their actions, regardless of the situation. There are many things where you can say, okay, well, what about if somebody's at a job and they're asked to do something by their employer? Well, even then, you still don't have any control over their actions. Now, again, for every action, there is a reaction. If you don't do what you're told at your job, obviously you will be removed from your job. However, the individual still has the choice of whether they want to do it, because the person making the request can't make them do it. Even in something that is more dire, where it's like, if you don't do this, then we'll end you right now. Interpret that as you may. That person still has a choice. They'll be like, okay, fine, let's end it right now. I'm not going to do it. They still have a choice. You can't control people. People need to take time and understand that. And that's all I got. And I did it under 20 minutes. Good. I was thinking it would be shorter than that, but okay. So, yeah, thank you for watching. I appreciate you for that. I will record one more episode and then I will do a podcast only episode today. Don't forget KIRWKC. The Apple Podcast link will be in the detail section as well for those who prefer to listen on Apple Podcasts, and you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts on there. As people who know me personally know, I'm not really an Apple person, but I won't keep people from subscribing to the Apple Podcast version of the show. So yeah, if you are an Apple person and you have an iPhone or iPad or iCabinet or iRefrigerator or whatever they're making these days, then you can subscribe. The link is in the details section, and you can listen to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast there. YouTube, hit the subscribe button, followed by the notification bell, Daily Motion, subscribe button. Instagram, KIRWKC. Also, Facebook. Don't forget to like the Facebook page, facebook.com/KIRWKC. As I said before, working on administrative stuff. You will more than likely be hearing about that administrative stuff starting next week. But as I said before, I don't announce anything until it's done. That is how I roll. So, yeah. Mention all of that. Again, thank you for those who have been listening to the podcast. I see the analytics. I appreciate you more than you ever know. And for those who have taken the time to watch the show, I appreciate you more than you will ever know. Be blessed.